My cheating sister ruined her marriage. My parents demanded I cancel my wedding to avoid overshadowing her. But when they found out my husband is a millionaire, they came crawling back and I exposed them all. I'm 29 years old. I've been married to Ethan for 2 years, and there are still people who ask me why I don't talk to my parents or my sister. The truth is, it's a long and complicated story. But basically, everything exploded right before my wedding. And when I say it exploded, I mean it literally destroyed whatever relationship I had with my family. I guess I should start at the beginning, like how my family was before this whole mess. Because if you don't understand that part, none of the rest makes sense. I grew up being the invisible sister, the one who's always there but nobody really sees. My sister, Natalie, is 3 years older than me, and for as long as I can remember, she was my parents' favorite, Paul and Catherine. And when I say favorite, I'm not exaggerating. Literally, everything revolved around her. If Natalie wanted something, she got it. If I wanted the same thing, my parents would say there wasn't enough money, or it wasn't necessary. Natalie had a huge quinceañera party. I had a family dinner. Natalie went to whatever university she wanted. They told me to go to community college because it was cheaper. You know what I mean? It was always like that, and I just accepted it because I thought that's how things were in families, that someone had to be the favorite and someone had to be the other one. My parents have a hardware store. Well, they had one because they already sold it. But at that time it was a business that barely gave them enough to live on. We weren't poor, but we weren't swimming in money either, like lower middle class leaning toward middle. The interesting thing is that my parents always acted like money was the most important thing in the world, and they'd get super weird when they met people with money. Now that I think about it, that has a lot to do with what happened later, but at the time, I didn't pay attention to it. I met Ethan like 4 years ago at a coffee shop, one of those random coincidences that change your life. He was waiting for his order, and I accidentally spilled my coffee on his shirt. I felt horrible, obviously, and offered to pay for dry cleaning and all that, and he laughed and said it didn't matter, that the shirt was old anyway. We started talking, and it turned out we had a lot in common. We liked the same movies, the same music, and he had this sarcastic sense of humor that I loved. And we started dating, and honestly, from the beginning, I felt he was different from anyone I'd ever met. He was kind, considerate, he really listened when I talked, and most importantly, he treated me like I mattered, like I was the priority. Now comes the important part, and it's something I kept secret from my family for a long time. Ethan works for his family's company. And when I say company, I don't mean a small business. I mean a pretty large pharmaceutical company. The Blackwoods, who are Ethan's parents, are millionaires, like really rich. They have a huge house, luxury cars, all that. But here's the thing. When I met Ethan, he never acted rich, never showed off, never flaunted anything. He dressed normal, drove a 2015 Honda Civic. He had other cars, but that was his favorite, and treated me like any normal person. It took me like 6 months into the relationship to meet his parents, and when I finally went to his house, I almost fainted when I saw the place. It was like a mansion, the kind you see in movies. The reason I never told my family about Ethan's financial situation is because I knew exactly how they were going to react. I knew my parents. I knew they were going to get weird, that they were going to start acting in that obsequious and fake way they did when they met someone with money. And honestly, I didn't want to deal with that. I wanted my relationship with Ethan to be something separate from my family, something that was just mine. So when I introduced them to Ethan, I told them he worked at a pharmaceutical company, which was technically true. I just omitted the part about his family owning the company. My parents met him. They were polite but not particularly enthusiastic. I think because they didn't see how Ethan could benefit them in any way. Meanwhile, Natalie had married Andrew like 2 years before I started dating Ethan. Andrew was a good guy, worked in finance, made good money, and my parents were super proud of him. They constantly talked about what a great catch Andrew was and how lucky Natalie was. I just nodded and went on with my life. I was already used to everything about Natalie being better than mine. Ethan proposed to me after 2 years of dating, at a normal dinner at our place, nothing extravagant or ostentatious, just him, me, and a beautiful ring. I said yes, obviously. I was happy, excited, ready to start this new chapter of my life. When we told my family, my parents said congratulations and all that, but they didn't look that excited. Natalie didn't even come to the family dinner we organized to celebrate, said she was busy with work. Ethan's parents, on the other hand, were super happy. They hugged me, told me they loved me like a daughter, and immediately started helping us with wedding plans. They wanted to pay for it all, but I insisted we put in at least something. So in the end, they paid like 80% and we paid the rest. We started planning the wedding for October, like in 6 months. I was in full planning mode, choosing flowers, trying on dresses, doing all those things brides do. My family didn't participate much in the process. My parents said they were busy with the hardware store, and Natalie almost never answered my calls when I wanted to ask her opinion about something. It didn't bother me that much because I had the Blackwoods who were super involved and excited about everything. Then we get to 1 week before my wedding, literally 7 days, and everything went to hell. Turns out Andrew discovered that Natalie was cheating on him. And when I say cheating, I mean a drunk kiss or something like that. I mean a full-on, months-long relationship with one of Andrew's friends. Apparently, Andrew found the messages on Natalie's phone. Super explicit messages where she and the guy talked about love and how they were going to be together and all that garbage. Andrew, who like I said was a good guy, confronted Natalie. She admitted everything, and he immediately told her he wanted a divorce and for her to leave the house. All this happened on a Tuesday. I think, or maybe Wednesday. I'm not sure. But what I do know is that it was exactly 7 days before my wedding. Obviously, the news spread fast. Natalie arrived at my parents' house crying, telling them everything, and my parents went into total crisis mode. They called me that same day, like 11 at night, and told me they needed to talk to me urgently. I went to their house the next morning, and there was Natalie, a complete mess, with red and swollen eyes from crying so much. My parents sat me down, and my mother, Catherine, told me they needed to ask me a huge favor. I thought they were going to ask me to talk to Andrew or something like that, but no. What they told me was much worse. My father, Paul, looked at me and said, "Grace, we need you to postpone your wedding." Just like that. As if he were asking me to postpone a dentist appointment. I sat there trying to process what I'd just heard, thinking maybe I'd misunderstood. I asked him if he was serious, and he said yes, completely serious. My mother added that Natalie was going through a very difficult time, that the divorce was going to be horrible for her, and that it wouldn't be fair for me to have my perfect, happy wedding while my sister was suffering. She said the wedding was going to be like rubbing Natalie's marital failure in her face, and that as a family we had to support her. I asked them how long they wanted me to postpone the wedding, and my father said at least a year. Maybe more. Until Natalie was in a better place emotionally. A year. They wanted me to postpone my wedding for a year because my sister had decided to cheat on her husband. I sat there staring at them, waiting for them to say it was a joke. But no, they were completely serious. Natalie didn't even look at me. She just sat there sobbing dramatically on the couch. I told them no, that I wasn't going to postpone my wedding. I explained that we already had everything planned, that the guests already had their flights booked, that the venue was paid for, that literally everything was ready. Besides, and this is the most important part, it wasn't my fault that Natalie had ruined her marriage. Why did I have to sacrifice my happiness for her bad decisions? My mother got angry and told me I was being selfish, that family supports each other in difficult times, and that I was putting my wedding above my sister's feelings. My father added that he'd always seen me as the sensible and responsible daughter, and that he expected me to make the right decision. I told them my decision was already made, that the wedding was still on, and that Natalie would have to deal with her problems like the adult she was. Natalie finally spoke and told me through tears that I'd never loved her, that I'd always been a horrible sister, and that she would never do this to me. I told her she'd never done anything for me because she'd always been the favorite and had never had to make any sacrifices for me. A huge fight broke out. My parents told me that if I didn't postpone the wedding, they weren't going to attend. I told them it was their decision, that I was getting married with or without them there. I left that house furious, frustrated, and honestly a little sad. Part of me, as much as I knew my parents had always been unfair, still hoped that at an important moment like my wedding, they would be there for me. But no, even at my wedding, Natalie had to be the center of attention. I told Ethan everything when I got home and he hugged me and told me we were going to have the most beautiful wedding in the world, with or without my family there. The following days were chaotic. My parents called me constantly trying to convince me to change my mind. Natalie sent me dramatic text messages saying I was breaking her heart and that she'd never forgive me. I ignored them all. The Blackwoods. When they found out what was happening, were outraged. Ethan's mother, whose name is Rebecca but I call her Becca, told me she'd be proud to walk me down the aisle if I wanted, that they were my family now and they would always support me. That made me cry. But with happiness, because finally someone was putting me first. The wedding day arrived, and my parents didn't show up. Natalie didn't either. Honestly, by that point, I didn't care anymore. I had Ethan, I had the Blackwoods, I had my friends, and that was enough. The wedding was beautiful, perfect, exactly as I'd imagined it. Ethan's father walked me down the aisle, and when he gave me away to Ethan, he whispered to me that he was gaining a wonderful daughter. I cried, obviously, but they were happy tears. The reception was amazing. We danced, we ate, we had fun, and for the first time in a long time, I felt completely happy and free. Here comes the part my parents didn't know about, and that eventually caused even more drama. The Blackwoods have quite a presence on social media because their company has Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn accounts, all that. They're one of those companies that post photos of corporate events, employee achievements, community activities, you know the type. Well, it turns out they posted wedding photos on the company account because Ethan is part of the family and they always share important events. The photos were beautiful, professional, and in one of them you could clearly see the company logo in the background because the reception was at one of the event halls the company owns. My parents saw the photos like 2 days after the wedding. Apparently someone, maybe some cousin or distant aunt, sent them the link to the posts. My mother called me. I didn't answer because I was packing for the honeymoon. She left me like 10 voicemails, each one more hysterical than the last. In the last message, she was yelling at me about how I dared to lie to them, that she knew the Blackwoods owned Blackwood Pharmaceuticals. How could I not tell them I was marrying into money? And that I had taken away their opportunity to make important business connections. And that's when I realized that everything for them had always been about money and appearances. They didn't care about my happiness. They didn't care that I was marrying someone who truly loved me. The only thing they cared about was that they could have used my marriage to benefit themselves financially. I got so angry that I blocked their number. I also blocked Natalie because she'd also sent me messages asking why I hadn't told them Ethan was rich and accusing me of being a selfish liar. Ethan and I went on our honeymoon to Italy for 2 weeks. It was the best 2 weeks of my life. No family drama, no annoying calls, just him and me exploring beautiful cities and enjoying being married. When we got back and arrived at our house, everything was normal. Or so we thought. Ethan had to stop by his parents' house to pick up some things they'd been keeping for us, so we went together. When we arrived, Becca opened the door with a face I'd never seen on her. She looked tired, annoyed, and a little uncomfortable. She let us in and told us that my parents had shown up at their house 3 days earlier, while we were still in Italy. Apparently they'd gotten the address I don't know how, probably researching online or asking someone, and they just showed up on a Saturday morning without warning. Becca said that when she opened the door, my parents introduced themselves with those fake smiles I knew so well and told her they needed to talk to her about their daughter, meaning me. Becca let them in because she thought maybe it was something urgent or important. My parents sat in the living room and started with this story about how I was a manipulative liar, that I'd hidden important information about Ethan from them, and that basically I'd betrayed them and my sister. My father told Becca that they, as parents, had a right to know who their daughter was marrying, especially when it came to a family with so much money and prestige. My mother added that I'd always been problematic, and she wouldn't be surprised if I was only with Ethan for his money. Becca looked at me as she told me this, and I felt my blood boiling. I couldn't believe my parents had done that they'd gone to my in-laws' house to badmouth me. Ethan's father, Richard, was also there, and he was the one who finally told my parents they had to leave. He told them they knew Grace very well, that she was an incredible, honest, and hard-working woman, and that the only people who seemed to have problems with her were them. He told them that Grace had made the decision not to share certain information with them, and that it had clearly been a smart decision given how they were reacting now. My father tried to say something about business opportunities, and Richard interrupted him and told him that Blackwood Pharmaceuticals didn't do business with small hardware stores, and that even if they did, they would never work with people who treated their daughter that way. Becca said my parents left super embarrassed and upset, muttering things about how the Blackwood family thought they were better than everyone. Richard added that the only thing he regretted was not telling them worse things. I stood there in total shock, feeling horrible that my in-laws had to deal with my family's drama. I apologized to them like 1,000 times, and Becca hugged me and told me I had nothing to apologize for, that my parents were adults responsible for their own actions, and that the only thing they'd done was defend their family, because I was family now. That night when we got home, I decided enough was enough. I unblocked my parents' number, just to send them a message telling them that what they'd done was unforgivable, that I didn't want to have contact with them anymore, and that any attempt to approach me or my husband or my in-laws was going to result in a restraining order. My mother responded with a long, dramatic message saying I was a horrible daughter, that I'd broken their hearts, and that when I had children, I'd understand the pain I was causing them. I replied that if I ever had children, I would never treat them the way they treated me, and I blocked them again. I thought that was the end of it all. But no, because like 2 weeks later, I received a message from a number I didn't know. It was Natalie using some friend's phone. She sent me a super long message blaming me for destroying the family, saying mom and dad were devastated and it was all my fault, that I'd chosen money over my own blood. I replied that the only thing I'd done was refuse to sacrifice my happiness for problems she'd caused herself, that my parents had shown that the only thing they cared about was money and appearances, and that as for family, they'd destroyed it themselves with years of favoritism and manipulation. I told her to take responsibility for her actions, to stop blaming others for her shitty life, and to never contact me again. I blocked that number too. The following months were amazing. Ethan and I settled into our married routine. We bought new furniture for the house, we adopted a cat named Mochi, and basically enjoyed our life without family drama. I spent Christmas with the Blackwoods, and it was the first Christmas in my life where I really felt loved and appreciated. I didn't miss my parents or Natalie at all. Honestly, I felt lighter, like I'd taken a huge weight off my shoulders. Like a year after all this, about 11 months after the cospless wedding, I discovered something that made me furious again. I have a cousin, Michelle, who I'd always gotten along with, or so I thought. Turns out Michelle had been in contact with my parents this whole time, passing them information about me. Things like where exactly I lived, whether I was pregnant or not, what I was doing, who I was hanging out with, everything. I found out because Michelle made the mistake of commenting on an Instagram post about a restaurant that Ethan and I had visited, and when I asked her how she knew we'd been there, she got super nervous and weird. I confronted her directly, and she finally admitted that my parents had asked her to keep them informed about my life, and that she'd agreed because she felt I was being too hard on them. I told Michelle that what she'd done was a huge betrayal, that she'd completely violated my trust, and that I didn't want to hear from her again. She tried to justify herself, saying she just wanted the family to be united. But I wasn't there for those kinds of excuses anymore. I blocked her from all my social media and eliminated her from my life too. After that, I went through my entire friends and followers list and deleted anyone who had close connections to my parents. Maybe it sounds paranoid, but I didn't care. My peace of mind was worth more than anything. Like 3 months ago, I found out by chance, through someone who has nothing to do with my family but who knows the area where my parents lived, that my parents sold the hardware store and moved to another city. Natalie went with them. I guess because without Andrew, she couldn't maintain her lifestyle alone. I don't know where they are exactly, and honestly, I don't care. It's weird because I don't even feel curious. Just total indifference. That part of my life is closed and I have no interest in reopening it. Ethan and I are doing great. We're thinking about starting to try for a baby next year, and we're excited about that possibility. The Blackwoods are still amazing. They treat me like their daughter, and I love them as if they were my real parents. I have wonderful friends, a husband who loves me, and a quiet life without unnecessary drama. Sometimes people ask me if I miss my family or if I regret how things ended, and the honest answer is no. You can't miss something you never really had. And what I had with my parents was never a real relationship based on love and respect. It was a relationship based on expectations, manipulation, and favoritism. It took me almost 30 years to understand that, and another few months to cut those ties. But now that I have, I feel freer and happier than I ever thought possible.